Call the October 18th Board of Selectmen meeting to order. I don't believe that there are any changes to the agenda, so we'll accept that by unanimous consent and move on to announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Okay, this meeting is being audio and video recorded in accordance with the provisions of the open meeting law. The Nantucket Harbor Shimo Sewer Extension Project is ongoing. We are continuing west along Vesper Lane right now. Do you want to give a quick update?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Shimo Nantucket Harbor Plus project's moving very well. We're about 200 feet beyond Cato Lane now on Vesper. McLean Lane the main line has been completed and tested. Tashma Lane, main line has been completed, and they started on the laterals this week at the end near the cul-de-sac, and they finished all the way up to the McLean Lane intersection today. They're going to continue down Tashma the rest of the week, and then they'll start on McLean next week. So there's a good chance that that whole neighborhood will be done within a month with all the laterals to all the property lines, and then there'll be the road work and the milling and paving and stuff. But it's been going very well. C Street project's also going very well. We're waiting for them to wire the new transformer, and as soon as that gets done, we'll be able to put our bypass system in place and get that up and running, and then the Surfside project's underway, and we're not running into any issues, so things are going well. So,
Thank you, David.
thank you. Oh, yes, yeah, one other thing. Myself, Erica, and the consultants have to go off island on Monday to meet with the tribes for the Shimo project because of some of the critically sensitive areas that we're going to be excavating in. It's to meet with the archaeologists over there and the tribal people, and they want to take and set up a schedule with the town on when they're going to be here and where they're going to be and what areas of the project we need them or they want to monitor. This will be my first experience with it. I think it'll be Erica's first experience, so it's going to be interesting to go from there. So, thank you.
Next, we are sponsoring a public forum on recreational marijuana, the laws, regulations, the articles that are on the special town meeting for November 6th. And this forum is to be held Thursday, October 26th from 4:30 to 6:30 here in this room. We've advertised it. It's out on the website. We're really trying to get these little flyers out, and we're really hoping for some good public attendance and input. Children's Beach Boat Ramp will be closed from October 31st through January 15th. We've been making that announcement regularly. The 2018 annual town meeting warrant is currently open for citizen warrant article submittals until November 20th at 4 p.m. Town council was available this afternoon from 2 to 4 at the town building conference room for citizen consultation. He will also be available tomorrow morning from 9 to 11 at the town building conference room as well. The November 6th special town meeting starts obviously Monday, November 6th at the high school auditorium at 6 o'clock. Did I just say that? And there's a special voter registration for the special town meeting, and the deadline for that is Friday, October 27th at 8 p.m. in the town building, town clerk's office. And lastly, an announcement came in today. There's a conference on island this weekend, with a public presentation Friday from 5 to 6:30 p.m. at the Westmore Wellness Center for the Nantucket Data Platform. Is that it?
Great.
That's it.
Thank you.
They've presented to us and
They
told us
have.
about their work.
They have, yes.
They've got a pretty outstanding group of people coming to tell us more.
Okay.
And if people do want to attend, they were hoping for RSVPs. And now we will move on to the public comment section of our agenda. If there's something someone wishes to comment on that is not otherwise on the agenda, now is the time. Hearing none, there's no new business that I'm aware of. Approval of minutes warrant. Oh, is this for the proclamation?
No, this is for events.
Yep, come on up.
Okay, so I'm Holly McGowan of
Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. And just want to make everyone aware that starting the end of this week, we're celebrating Red Ribbon events, and we have lots of events listed on the calendar, and one, in addition to the marijuana public forum, another noteworthy event is a chat and chowder event for prevention of youth substance use for parents and community members. And at this event, we're going to be revealing some of our 2017 Pride Youth Risk Survey results from grades 8th through 12th. And then we have all the other events listed on our calendar. So, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Are there any changes to the minutes? Someone want to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of payroll warrants and treasury warrants.
Motion approved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of pending contracts. There are 2. Did anyone have any questions?
I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Citizen departmental request. This is the Nantucket Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention, request for proclamation of Red Ribbon Week. Did you all want to read the proclamation, or do you want me to? Okay. Red Ribbon Week Proclamation 2017. Whereas alcohol, tobacco, and drug abuse in the United States prevents millions of people from reaching their full potential in school, in the workplace, and in their communities. And whereas the 2017 annual observance of Red Ribbon Week provides Nantucketers the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to healthy lifestyles and to celebrate the safe, healthy choices that most young people and adults make every day on Nantucket, by wearing and displaying red ribbons and sharing information. And so now therefore be it resolved that the Nantucket Board of Selectmen do hereby proclaim October 23 through 30, 2017 as Nantucket Red Ribbon Week, and encourage all citizens, businesses, and private agencies, media, religious and educational institutions to support and promote activities that raise awareness and encourage prevention of underage substance use and adult substance abuse. As well, we call on all Nantucket residents and visitors to wear a red ribbon, button, sticker, or bracelet throughout the week in recognition of their commitment to a healthy lifestyle free of substance abuse for residents of all ages in our Nantucket community. I think that most of us have been touched by this issue in some way, and it's just really important to acknowledge. Town Manager's Report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's about this time of year when our assessor comes in and reviews with the board a kind of a preliminary review of the residential exemption and tax rate shift calculations and potential options, and she's got some information in your packet. This is a bit in preparation for a hearing on November 15th for the board to determine the residential exemption and the amount of it, as well as the tax rate shift.
Thanks, Libby. I don't think I've ever come up here at 6:25 before, so this is great.
It's only 6:08.
Don't look at the clock, it's not right.
That's a 7:25.
We could bump you.
So I have
We could
plenty of
bump you
time for
behind
my-
Tom Nevers.
No, thank you. I have a 60-page PowerPoint for you. No, just teasing. This is not your tax rate hearing tonight. This is really just a preliminary discussion, and I think it's important to educate the 2 newest members on what will take place on November 15th. So if you could go back to the very first slide, Erica. Basically, the purpose of the tax rate hearing that you will hold is twofold: to determine the tax allocation by class and the adoption, if any, of a residential exemption. Just next slide. So this is last year's actual numbers. The tax levy was $74.5 million, and it gets divvied up by class. We have residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal property. And these percentages here are true percentages that they represent to the whole. So when we talk about a shift that you're going to adopt, those percentages, for residential, it's 93.9%. That would change. That would actually be reduced. Your commercial, industrial, and personal property classes would be multiplied by the factor that you choose. Next slide, I think. So last year, we adopted a factor of 1.75, so you can see the commercial class should have been 4.74%, and that moved over to 8.29% of the tax levy. So that's the share that will be, the commercial class will now be responsible for.
You want questions as we go through, or you want to wait till the end?
If you have questions as we go along, that's good.
I just,
See Rita.
as the shift, has that been stable over time, the 1.75?
What happened prior to Prop 2.5 is basically it's embedded in the Constitution that property values, that taxation should be uniform. However, prior to Prop 2.5, values were all over the place, and tax rates. So the burden was not distributed evenly until there were several court cases that happened. 1961, Bettigal versus the city of Springfield. They found that there had been a deliberate practice of overvaluing commercial properties and undervaluing residential properties. Then there were, the Supreme Judicial Court ordered that everybody should do that. It should be at 100% and be fair. However, it wasn't until 1975, there were several more court cases that were brought forward. It was embedded in the law, but no one was really monitoring that process. So they decided to put it in the hands of the Department of Revenue. And it kind of came in hand with Prop 2.5, which would limit how much property taxes could increase each year. It also monitored to ensure that all cities and towns were assessing fairly. We first went to 100% in 1981. I believe our tax rate went from $126 per thousand to about $8. But because values had risen so significantly. But in order to kind of equalize what was going on, Prop 2.5 also allowed that you could adopt a split tax rate, which Nantucket did at that time. It was only, you could only go up to 150% for your shift, or a factor of 1.5. Nantucket did that. Over time, the amount changed, and we're allowed to increase it to 1.75, as long as the residential class was still paying a certain percentage of the burden.
And my question, we've been at that shift 1.75 for some time.
I believe it's been since 1997.
Okay, that's some time. Thank you.
Yes, some
Thank you.
time. So I think we're done. There's no questions. We can go to the next. And this just shows you the burden, what we've done over time. Another consideration is the fact that commercial property values don't increase as rapidly as the residential do. So as you can see, it's a small percentage that the commercial class pays.
But certain neighborhoods, certain commercial neighborhoods have grown substantially.
Yes, they have.
So it's not fair to say that across the board, they don't grow as quickly. In some areas, like the downtown, a lot of the downtown businesses are paying quite a bit and have increased quite a bit in relation to other commercials or in relation to other residential areas.
That's correct.
In that
yeah.
case, we've seen that same experience in residential. Some parts of Nantucket are exponentially increasing and others not so much.
Exactly.
Any questions on that? So the second part of the hearing would be to adopt a residential exemption, Chapter 59, Section 5C. You can grant an exemption up to 20% of the average residential value to properties that are owned and occupied by people as their primary residence. This exemption was increased as part of the Municipal Modernization Act last year. Formerly, it could be no more than 20%. Now it can be 35% of the average residential value. So our average residential value last year was 1.8 million. So the exemption just at 20% was $373,000. So we have an exemption that is actually larger than the average value in some communities.
What's the average property value with a residential exemption?
The average, I actually have that on the next chart.
Oh, okay.
The average year-round value for last year was $1.2 million, and there were 2,172 owner-occupied properties, so that's the average of those. Also calculated a median. The median year-round value is $977,000. So,
And compare that to the average residential value of 1.9.
right.
I mean, it's a huge differential.
So there's actually two parts to your tax hearing. The residential exemption will have no bearing on the commercial class because that reduction in value is made up by the entire residential class. It actually raises the tax rate because you have less value to raise it with. As you can see, it reduced our taxable value within the residential class by $811,000. So every property within the residential class, including those that get the exemption, have a higher rate because of it.
To your point, Jim, it's the average value without the residential, without the residential exemption is higher than that average. Because you've got the residential exemption properties valued at 1.2, and your average is 1.86 or so. So if you did the equation, I used to have it off the top of my head, but I haven't done it in a few years, but it's probably closer to like 2.1, 2.2 is the average value without residential exemption, something like that.
The residential exemption gets the benefit of being measured against the entire residential class, which includes residential vacant land, condominiums, second homes. So all of the multi-million-dollar homes are in that calculation, which is then the 20% of that is applied to the year-round parcels. This last screen was kind of recycled because I had a deadline to meet for the packet, so I prepared one that's a little easier to follow, which is that separate handout that you got today, and I do apologize for that. The other slide, for anybody that may have downloaded it from home, was actually showing the increase between 2016 and 17, which I think kind of masks how the exemption and the shift actually operate. So in this particular spreadsheet, the yellow highlighted row is your benchmark. So last year we voted, you voted to shift 1.75, and our residential rate was $339 per thousand, and the commercial was $599. So if we had done nothing, the pink shaded columns to your right, all of those variances are measured off that yellow row, just to show you how that operates. Questions? So if we had no exemption and no shift last year, the average year-round property owner would have seen a tax bill that was $1,300 higher. That's that very first row. If we had voted a 35% residential exemption and a shift of 1.75, which is at the very bottom, the average year-round property owner would have seen a tax bill that was $887 less. So this is really just to digest.
And again, it's a zero-sum game, so it's that tax burden is borne,
Right,
it's all
the
part
tax
of
rate, as you can see, it's the same rate when you don't shift. The very far top to the left with no shift, that the rates would be the same.
No, I guess my point is, for me, correct me if I'm wrong, so since 1997, we've been using a CIP shift of 1.75.
Correct.
The one at 1.25, 1.5 are for illustrative purposes?
Those are lesser amounts. I think the thought was that now that you have the option to go up to a 35% residential exemption.
No, I understand what but I mean, you could have put in 1.15, and I mean, those
Right.
are just
Oh, absolutely.
arithmetic calculations of what might be.
Correct.
But in terms of the history, since 1997, we've had 1.75.
Right.
And for me personally, I don't see any reason to change that history, but.
We're not voting tonight,
No,
but I'm
this
just
is
going to show out there for the purposes of people thinking about it, what my preference would be. I'd like to raise the residential exemption to 25%, and I think that we should lower that shift to 1.5 because I think that year-round businesses are struggling with all of their costs and just got hit even harder with labor issues this year. And I just think I think it would be more fair.
So that would
I guess
actually be.
if we're talking, individually now, I'm all about the history, and we've had, commercial values go up and down, and the cost, and we're, to me, I mean, whatever the number is, the fact that it's 1.75 to me, that makes a lot of sense. And my personal view is that, with the high cost of living for year-round residents, I think we should give folks the greatest benefit that we can, and I'd be in favor of a 35%.
We had this discussion last year, and it ended up being sort of a split vote at 2-2, and we kept it where it was. I would be opposed to going to 35 because I think we should only do that when we're adding substantial debt and there's a reason to bring the amount that year-round residents pay down. If we bring it down now, then anything we do later to raise it will have people upset. So I just think that you want to do it in concert and for a good reason. I also think that the logic of that if you live here, most of the people that live here have businesses and they own property more than just a residential property, and they're struggling to be here. So to give the year-round people a break, you have to also start to think about giving it to them on the commercial rate. Now, I'm not saying to go to 1.75, but I think what Don's talking about, there's a lot of sense to that. The reason I know downtown has increased so much is my family owns a property with 3 tenants. Now, it's triple net lease on a couple of those, but the value on those properties, because of what's happening down there, has sort of doubled or tripled. So all of a sudden, these guys have come to us and have renegotiated their rents, and we have to renegotiate them down, or they would have left. And it was on account of the taxes. And so I think, that's where I know certain pockets have been hit really hard. And people can look and go, well, great, you have this building that's worth a lot of money. Well, it's only worth a lot of money if you sell it. If you're keeping it, and it's it's in your family, and it's your father's retirement money or part of his retirement money is coming from those, the rents, then it's a direct hit to that. So I just think it's very nuanced. There's a lot of people here who are land rich and cash poor, and who are struggling to pay those, So I think when we look at this, it's not so, I don't think it's as simple as we've always done it like this, so we should always do it like this, or, so I just think we have to, there's something that should go into this.
To Matt's point about the preponderant, a lot of folks who live here year-round own commercial property is what you're positing.
No, I'm not positive. I'm positing there's a lot of people who can only afford to stay here because they're running a business or they own, and it's not just commercial property downtown, they own commercial property
No, I know.
all
but
through the
I
island.
So if that's if that's a theory, do we have any idea how many commercial property owners there are on the island?
Not as many. I mean, it's a very small percentage of the whole. The average commercial value is 1.7 million.
No, I'm talking about individual property owners. How many people pay? No, okay, that's
I would
fine.
say under 1,000.
Okay.
But then there are a lot of rental tenants.
Yeah, and if it passes
They
through,
pay
that's.
triple net.
Yeah, so, and this is one of the things I argue with Rick Atherton all the time, is that some people think that all the money is gonna flow to NIR. That all you're doing is flowing the money to NIR. It's not actually true. A lot of this stuff is just triple netted to the tenants. So, so it's not as simple as that. Some might flow there, but it's coming back. Like, they haven't been able to raise their rents as much as I'd like to. Places have been left open. I just think it's not a simple equation.
But rental tenants aren't necessarily going to see, so there's a lot of small businesses paying rent. They're not going to see any benefit from that per se. They will.
Because most business leases are triple net, which means they pay the taxes and insurance.
I see. Gotcha.
That's
Yeah, that's what I was
terminology.
So I was going to chime in. I've never seen a lease that wasn't triple net lease. I haven't
That
seen.
was?
That was not.
Right, for commercial.
So it's not the commercial owners, it's the business owners that are mostly year-round. So can I ask you if just as an example, so I understand this, if we were to just exercise the 25% residential exemption, that would be the 249 for the
Correct.
average year-round.
Correct.
Savings, right?
Yep.
And it would, if we stayed at, like you said, move to 1.5 shift, then that would lower the burden of the commercial
Correct.
triple net lease by 1,500. Am I reading that right?
Yes, you
Okay.
are.
Just wanna make
Good
sure
job.
And I think my logic was similar of going to 25 rather than 35 is we have asked for some overrides recently. And I think that it's time to raise the residential exemption, but to leave us leeway to raise it again when some other really large things come up.
We have the fire station coming up. That's a huge one. So,
Libby, will
I mean,
we know?
maybe just a, I hear that rationale. I am all about history. I think people before me made those decisions for whatever reason, and, I personally would like to give as much money as we can to the homeowner on Nantucket, and that's just, we'll see how the vote goes.
Will we know this is for Libby, we know the, sort of the capital, before we have to adopt this, will we have any idea how much, how many overrides, what stuff's going to be proposed? Approximately even?
The process will not be complete by then, but we could probably give you an update at that meeting, I think.
Because I would like that to inform what we should do and how much we should do, if anything.
I'm comfortable with, if we're going to increase the residential exemption, I'd like to look at changing the CIP shift. So I think that's smart. I hear what you're saying, Jim, about history. It's probably been done that way for a reason, for a long time.
And unlike some of the board, I don't own commercial property, so
I don't either.
so I don't pay rent or leases
Yeah.
or whatever. So I just, and I'm not, so.
Well, I can give a little history from way back. You go back 30 years, 35 years, a lot of the businesses were cash, and it was, and a lot of it wasn't, you go back to when I was a kid, a lot of it wasn't taxed, and people made, in a short season, they made a lot of their money in those businesses. They've become, sort of pick on restaurant businesses, has become a lot different industry, and it's a lot more difficult than it was 35, 40 years ago. And there's a lot more rules and a lot, so we're paying, it's just an interesting thing. And over time, a lot of them have been charged more money, and it isn't just the tax money, it's all the other things that they have to pay. And it's any business. And so it's just a different world, And if you talk to some of the people like Steve Bender, who ran a place on Main Street, he can tell you some great stories, and it was the Wild West, and it's a lot different now.
Right. And what you didn't have historically was you didn't have the option of going up to 35% for the residential exemption, which kind of tempers
Right.
what Dawn is
We
suggesting.
didn't have that option before.
Right.
But during my lifetime on Nantucket, in town, There's no hardware store anymore. There's no 5 and 10 anymore. One of the pharmacies is gone. I mean, not that that's necessarily attributed to the taxes, because it's a little bit of everything, but again, it's a little bit of everything that that makes those changes.
So this would shift this burden, like the 75 million or whatever it is. We're still going to get it. So it just shifts the burden to the second homeowners.
Yes, you'll still get it.
Yeah.
Actually, you're going to get more because that's last year's numbers.
Right.
So this is really just a tool for you to look at, kind of contemplate, when you actually take the vote on November 15th. Hopefully I'll have true numbers by then. We're finalizing commercial values right now. I'm going to finalize the recap, but we've got the special town meeting in early November. I don't think that it's going to impact anything, but I'll hopefully have real numbers for you on the 15th.
I think the other reason to be careful, it's sort of tempting to say, let's just, let's move that residential exemption up, and and then we can spend all the money we want to spend, et cetera. And there's some proposals that have been sent around suggesting that. And you have to be careful, because a 46% increase on the non-residential could have some, could have some impacts that we don't know what they'd be. They could be fairly severe on certain segments of the economy. So it's one of those things you don't want to, in my opinion, go too quickly. You have to have a rationale, and it has to be linked to something, or you might do something that you regret.
Right, because you want to be cognizant that the 249 decrease by adopting a 25% residential exemption and the 1.5 shift actually will increase the average residential tax bill by $168 because it's going to have a higher tax rate.
So that seems like it's going in the wrong direction.
That's the properties that don't get the exemption.
Oh, okay.
Because it increases your rate.
All right. So that's not, yeah, okay.
Because it's shared, that's shared over a lot bigger number.
Right.
That's shared over many more than the commercial or the residential exemptions. So that's the.
Correct.
And the only other thing we should say, this is my favorite meeting.
I know it.
Of every year.
Well, it's only 6:30.
I know. One more thing.
This is great.
Is if you're out there in TV land and you haven't asked for a residential exemption and you live here year-round, you should walk in and ask for it. It's not something that is automatically sort of, you don't assume that, that we know that you need it or that you
Right.
deserve it.
We do our best.
You have to ask, and people are surprised when they realize, oh, I don't get it. If you get it, it's written right there on your, on your
see it.
tax bill. And
Yes.
the people that have come to me and been like, oh, I didn't know that, you'd be shocked. Previous selectmen and their family and some of my family members, people you just assume have it and know, don't even know.
And they should come in within the next month because it's the one abatement that we can actually put in advance. You don't have to file. I mean, after the bill goes out, they have 3 months to file, but anytime we can get them ahead of time because it impacts the rate. I'd rather know now rather than later. As long as they haven't put their property into an LLC, which seems to be the popular thing to do these days.
So I'll
What
just-
happens in that
yeah, what
case?
happens with
An
that?
LLC will no longer qualify because it's a corporation.
What about what if it's in sort of a family trust, realty trust or something? Do those
That
qualify?
gets more complex.
And
It
how do
does
you-
qualify as long as 2 criteria are met. You have to have a legal and a beneficial interest in that trust. So you have to be a trustee and a beneficiary.
Yeah.
But no 2 trusts are alike, so we usually require that you bring it in.
And do they have to have a certain percent of ownership, or is it?
No.
No, they just have to be legal.
You can be a
and-
co-trustee.
Gotcha, okay.
And I'll just make, like Matt, a plug to the TV audience. This is an important decision that affects everybody's pocketbook, whether you're a commercial owner or renter or property owner, residential property owner, or you rent. Because we're going to have a public hearing on the 15th, November 15th. I encourage people to come. We really need to reflect the views, I think, the views of the citizens and voters, so look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. The next thing is under Selectmen's reports and comments, that I think the town managers.
Yep, Madam Chairman, I can
Want to give
give
an
you
outline?
a bit of an introduction here. At the last Selectmen's meeting on September 20th, the board requested that administration come back with something of a timeline for the erosion control, or not erosion control, the cleanup of an area of the bluff that is eroding out at the park. So we have that. The DPW director is going to review that with you in a moment. It's basically maintenance work for the area of the bluff that is eroding, and it's the cleanup of some debris that's fallen over. And that's been discussed with the Conservation Commission, and it's an allowable activity as maintenance effort. There is the potential for a more comprehensive long-term plan for the rehabilitation of the bluff that's been put forward as a suggestion by some of the citizens that are interested in the future of the park out there. And while we think that's probably a good idea, we're not prepared to put forward a timeline right now until the master plan funding is approved and or we work this into a more of a master plan for that area. Or alternatively, or in addition to, work it into a coastal resiliency plan that we have discussed, or a hazard mitigation plan. This is all going to be coming back to you at some point in a more comprehensive way that looks at the entire area of the island and not just areas here and there. We also are recommending, as I think the board knows, and you've had some discussion about this, that the $100,000 that was appropriated at the 2017 annual town meeting for the replacement of the playground at the Tom Nevers Park be reappropriated at the 2018 annual town meeting for the master plan instead of the playground. And we had discussed doing this at the special town meeting. However, it was determined that there were other priorities to deal with at the special, and it would be put on, potentially subject to the board's continued review and determination at the annual town meeting. The DPW will continue maintaining the park as they have been, with the usual maintenance activities, mowing and addressing any immediate safety concerns, and all the normal maintenance that happens out there. The Nantucket Community School during the season, we'll continue managing the scheduled recreational activities. And I have communicated with the citizen work group members about, they have, asked what other things they could do in the meantime. And I've suggested a number of things that they could perhaps work on, including seeking input from various stakeholders, such as the community school, camps, daycare providers, recreational fishermen. We've gotten an email from a couple of these people, beach users, the land bank, current users of the park, maybe talk to people while they're actually using the park, things like that. It would be great for them to provide us some input on what we might be able to do with the bunker out there. Is it enough of a community asset to maintain it in a more active way? Is it, don't be offended anybody by this, but is it in the way? Should it just be removed? That kind of thing. So I think they might be looking into that. And as far as getting some additional town participation in the work group, I think a couple of board members have expressed some interest or willingness to meet with the citizens from time to time until we have a, hopefully, appropriation at the annual town meeting for the development of a master plan, at which point we would, I think, get more active with town participation in a work group. And if two of you are interested in doing that, just so you know, there is an added administrative factor to that, which involves posting meetings, taking minutes, posting the minutes, and that kind of thing. So it would be very helpful to have a citizen volunteer to help do some of that. DPW director is going to tell us a bit about the plans to get at the gap, we're calling it, on the bluff.
Good evening. So as I mentioned last time, we're working with one of our construction assets to to affect some change out at two specific locations. The primary location previously identified was the end of Nantucket Road, working on what the emergency manager and natural resources had worked hard over the last few years to get permits for, to be able to remove asphalt and reestablish sort of the head end of Nantucket Road to begin beach nourishment there, so that ultimately that can withstand the winter storms, and when it gets washed away, we can replenish the sand. So that's underway. I'd make a side note to say that most recently, Sheila, the harbor master, has worked with some local contractors to remove a lot of the debris that was recently uncovered during Jose. So I really want to send a shout out to Sheila for her extra efforts there. To Tom Nevers would be after the Nantucket Road section, and right now we're being told schedule-wise we're probably looking at early December to start both of those efforts. I looked at it, and to me we're probably looking at about a week at each location, and right now the Tom Nevers site, we have sandbagged right before Jose, ultimately where a berm will permanently be placed. And for right now, we have not noticed any substantial changes. It's been ongoing, and it's certainly gotten worse over the years, but it hasn't progressed to anytime recently. It hasn't progressed substantially. So we're confident that before the end of the year, work will start at both of these locations and hopefully turn around quickly.
Just a question. In regard to reappropriating the $100,000 that was meant for a playground,
Sure.
do we need to either appropriate additional funds? Do we need anything that is there? There were some rust and things on some of the items out there. Is there some stuff that imminently needs to be repaired? Because a master plan is going to take some time.
It is. So having been approached by the town manager earlier today, I think before winter, certainly in the immediate future, we can get out and take a look at it with our staff. And if there are specific items at the playground that pose some kind of imminent threat, they'll likely be removed rather than trying to limp them along until some later date, just to make sure that we're not dealing with an ongoing maintenance issue until such time.
Or if maybe there's something that needs to be replaced.
I'm a bit hesitant to start investing money in something that's likely to be completely redesigned. So
I know. I'm just worried about the length of time things take and making sure that that playground is up and running for summer use, because a lot of people use it.
For summer use?
Yeah.
Sure.
And not
No,
just like have lots of pieces of equipment disappear.
No, I hear that because, master plan's not going to start until the appropriation's available in July, and it's going to take some time and public input, and the 5-year-olds to play there will be 10-year-olds and not interested in a playground anymore. So it'd be nice to have, I don't know what the answer is, but it'd be nice to have some kind of accommodation.
I'd just like some opinions on whether we need to replace anything to get, certainly through next summer, but realistically probably through the next 2 summers. There's heavy camp use out there.
Definitely.
And so forth.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
And my understanding is that myself and Jason have volunteered to be the Board of Selectmen liaisons.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. So everyone who's involved, if the people who are here could make sure that we have everybody's email address, and we'll set up a first meeting time. And we will have to post it, and we will have to elect someone to be a secretary and so forth. And anyone else in the public who is interested, let us know. Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted to do the minutes and stuff.
Well, I love doing minutes. And if that's what you'd like me to dedicate my time to.
No, I saw a sparkle. I thought maybe
Yeah,
you were interested.
That was about something else.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Well, any committee reports?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Not a committee, but Jason and I went to the Cape Cod Selectmen's meeting last Friday. The discussion was mostly about marijuana and how different towns are approaching it. And it was really just a matter of sort of two different perspectives with some advice from the state regarding the regulations. But I didn't think it didn't really add too much new to the conversation, but it was interesting to hear what other selectmen are worrying about.
Yeah, there's two things that stood out to me. There's a lot of the Cape is trying to figure out from a chamber perspective and selectmen and town leaders of what brand do they want. You know, family friendly, it's always been a family place. Will this change that or not? They were just asking those questions. And the other thing that stood out was someone from the MMA said that if you were going to, like in our situation, if we want to ban recreational or limit it, what I thought was we had to have a ballot vote and a 2/3 vote zoning bylaw. And a guy from MMA, I forget his name, said the zoning bylaw, that's incorrect. You do not need that. So that is wrong? Okay. I wanted to tell him that, but there's too many people in the room. Yeah.
And it depends whether your community voted for it or against it at the ballot the first time.
Well, he was saying if you are in a yes,
Yeah.
you don't need the zoning 2/3 bylaw. So I thought that was interesting because we have been told you do need that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another.
Right.
Another quick presentation that was made, and I think it was interesting, there's a bit of history to it, and the Selectmen's Association had given support before, but was for a 12-mile buffer for mid-ocean trawling gear, boats, and that gained more or less unanimous support again from the Selectmen's Board. So I think the Fishermen's Alliance, Commercial Fishermen's Alliance, is going to be pursuing that again.
Great.
So.
CPC is actually voting tomorrow. Today, we voted for what projects were in and out in terms of requests. Tomorrow, we actually get down to the real dollars. So that will be in for as a citizens warrant article for the annual town meeting coming up.
Go ahead, Jim.
I just, a comment, I attended the 3 or 4 hour planning board meeting last week, and lots of conversation within the audience about the project at Six Fairgrounds, and a lot of questions, and I suggested they all come here and talk under public comment, but that may be something we would like to, I know there's been some emails back and forth, that it may be something that would be maybe nice to add to an agenda to discuss their concerns more formally.
We had a little discussion about that today, and about the housing specialist actually organizing a neighborhood forum for discussion.
And not at the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Well, and to identify if there's anything that we actually would give further input on in terms of policy. This was my conversation with the town manager about how to
I think their
handle it.
request was to come to be on the agenda of a board meeting. So,
Not to elaborate, belabor this, but at our agenda meeting, I think we weren't saying they can't come to a selectmen's meeting. Obviously, they can under public comment at any time, but I think the idea was to get some kind of a neighborhood forum, or maybe more than one, underway, so that sort of basic questions can be answered, so that we're not spending a lot of time at a selectmen's meeting answering basic questions that have already been answered several times, or maybe that just people need information about, and then beyond that, if they continue to have concerns about the project, then perhaps the board would want to entertain.
I mean, that would be helpful. One of the questions, one of the assumptions people made is that Tacoma Way is a private road, and that was quickly dispelled. It's a public road, so some of the foundation of their concerns would be helped by a forum like that.
There were a lot of questions that have come to me that the answers are very readily available. It's just a matter of getting the information directly to the person and probably talking about it in some kind of a setting that's completely about that project. And of course, anyone can always come to a selectmen's meeting under public comment. But in terms of us actually making any votes on everything, at this point, we issued an RFP. It's been responded to and awarded. So there may be some things that come up that we can respond to, but actually answering the questions does kind of go back to all of that information that's come before now.
And some of it is the purview of the HDC, for example. Some of it is still being worked out at the planning level about parking and restrictions or none, and where, the roads. So some of that is still to be worked out.
And my understanding is that the planning board's actually postponed their meeting for tomorrow night on this.
Oh.
Awaiting some more information for a few reasons.
The representative from Halkeen, I think, did a very nice job, and was part of the conversation that night, too.
I think a public forum is good. I triaged some misinformation today, just kind of randomly overheard things. And I'm not even too into it. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people are scared, frustrated, so I think a public forum would be great. And then if we need to also have it here, I would be for that.
NPDC was on Monday, and the NPDC is finalizing sort of Old South Road recommendations, has looked at the whole corridor of Old South Milestone out to Nobody Farm Road, and is sort of finalizing their recommendations for which ones need to be done first. And they're looking just at that single corridor. They're not looking at what's the impact further on. The studies didn't look at what's the impact at Stop and Shop or what's the impact on Union Street or Pleasant Street. It's really just in this area. It could do some, do some positive. I still wonder what's the impact when you go quicker through those two and you're going into another small road, but that wasn't part of it. One of the points that I made on Monday, and I'll make again here, I think some of this is a prioritization issue. And, so we do Old South, and maybe we do an override and we do that quickly. I think we still have to find a way to get in-town bike paths done and done right away. Because if we ever want to get to the point where we're using alternatives in the sunny weather, people are biking again, and, families feel safe biking, and workers bike or walk to work, there needs to be a safe way to do that. And I personally think staff time and effort, and I think even some money, if we're going to be doing overrides for Old South, should go directly to those, and we should finish them. Because that's the only way that we're going to slow down the numbers of vehicles. If we continue to spend money accommodating vehicles, we're not doing just that. Some of I think some of the roundabouts make it safer to cross, make it safer for bicycles. I think there's a lot of positives there, but if we continue to, widen roads and turning lanes, et cetera, and we continue to ignore and say, well, that's tip money, and we'll do the in-town bike path in 15 years. If we continue that, I don't think that we're doing the right thing for the public. And so I just hope that we find a way to, when this stuff comes to us this year, either through the capital committee or through any other manner, through town meeting, hope we find a way to prioritize the getting people on alternative transportation in and out of the core. That's where everyone wants to be.
Can I just make one comment?
No, that's right.
I think we absolutely need to do both.
Exactly.
We've got to accommodate the vehicles that are already here, and we've got to make it safer for the bikes, particularly to get in and out of town. And we need to just move ahead with both. And if we're raise the residential exemption to 30%, if that's going to make that happen. But I think we do need to do these overrides to get these projects moving. The traffic we can't put it off anymore.
I mean, to me, the Old South is a given. That's in terms of my thinking. That's history. But I can't tell you what the status is of the in-town bike paths right now. Maybe others can, but I think I'd like to maybe we could have a conversation about that and have a report on that and see if there's, because my recollection is that when we talk about bike paths, it's like, well, we have a priority, and that's down on this is here and this is there, and it's for 15 years away, and so then it kind of gets off the radar, and I think it's important that we bring it back. So maybe we'd have a little report and with some estimates on how to get,
You're describing kind of the conversation the other night. is, I brought up that issue, and then
Yeah.
people, yeah, but that'll be done under this and whatever.
right.
And then, so then and then all the people are like, oh, we have to do this. And I said, okay, and I picked one of the
Right.
priority roundabouts. It was like
Yeah.
$2.2 million or something. And, and one of the members was, adamant, we have to do that too and do all this. I go, well, would
Right.
you do that? Or would you, put staff time and effort into doing the in-town bike pass? What would you prioritize? Oh, I'd pick that. And is there anyone else here that wouldn't pick the in-town bike path? Wasn't a single person there.
Wow.
So it was very interesting. So they
Right.
know the importance, but
Yeah.
when you look at things in silos, you look at
Right.
just one
Yeah,
thing.
they're not.
Then you prioritize
Yeah.
it against just one thing.
Within that.
You have to
silo,
find a
yeah.
way to prioritize it against the other things.
Right.
And that's really hard sometimes, the way things are presented in
Yeah.
the, things get their own momentum,
Right. And how it's funded and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
so.
The
But
next
it's all
big-
transportation, though.
The next big tip project is Bartlett Surfside Roundabout.
Yes.
That's the next one that's scheduled.
Yep.
And then the phase 2 and 3 for the in-town bike path, there is movement on that. There are people talking about it. I talked to Mike Burns today. Next week, they're even meeting with VHB just to think about what it'll look like, because the first design was done in 2006. We need to look at something else. So there is movement there. Not
And there might be-
appropriations, but.
No, appropriate, but I think maybe the appropriations should happen, and maybe
Yeah.
and if we're spending staff time, if we have to spend staff time to do takings and research and whatever, then maybe that should come to the priority, so it gets done. I mean, I just think, my own gut is that we're gonna just be moving the problem. I think when we move, in Old South Road's gonna take a while to fix anyway. But I have a feeling that when we fix Old South Road, we're gonna, every dwelling is another 2-point-something cars. We're gonna have another 1,000 dwellings, we're gonna have another 2,000 or 3,000 cars, and it's gonna move more quickly out here, and that's gonna be great. But then you're gonna drive somewhere else, and then you're gonna be in a bottleneck. So, we can continue to chase our tail like that, or we could say, okay, how do we encourage people, and to use alternative transportation, and how do we make it safe for them? I know all summer, when I come to the agenda meetings, I'm biking everywhere. You can't, you can't drive. So I just think we need to really put that on the top of the
But
pile
we could
somehow.
fund it from others with our own resources, rather than a tip. And again,
Exactly.
I mean, I'd personally like to have somebody come back and give us an update, the staff perspective, and if we need to put some money into a bike path for next year, now's the time to be talking about it.
I agree with you, Jim. I think
Yeah.
because we have so many projects going on right
Yeah.
now, and what are the ones that we'd like to see that aren't
Yeah.
funded, just so we can get a sense of
Yeah.
prioritizing. On a positive note, well, this is all positive, but more positive note, I was talking to the Safe Routes to School people. They were here from the state, and I asked them kind of at the end of my chat, I said, how do we compare to other places? Because sometimes we get so caught up in the sidewalk's so terrible, and I said, how do we compare? And they said, really, really good. Because when we come here, we can walk everywhere, from downtown to Mid-Island, all around the school, and most places, kids are walking in the dirt, on the side of the roads, whether it's the Vineyard or the Cape. They said we're above average for walking. I said biking, you have some challenges, but walking for the schools, downtown, for a historic center, they were really impressed. And I thought that was really good to hear, because sometimes we get kind of caught up in that it's not so good.
We're an urban environment. I mean, everyone thinks that we're not, but most of the areas, all the areas you just described are urban environments. And and then you go to somewhere like, pick on Hyannis, you can hardly walk from the boat to the mall. It's not very safe. They're changing it, and they understand it, but some of this is with the density, and some of the problems that we have is us following, 1970 Providence suburban patterns. We're trying to undo some of the suburban patterns that we laid on here. So, and they use Nantucket as an example of new urban planning all over the country. We're one of the first places that, they cite, and it's places like us, Savannah, Georgia, those are the New Orleans, those are the places that people love and they want to be at, and they're dense, and you walk a lot of places, and I just think that we're very fortunate that that's where we live, and that's
Yeah.
what we have as an example.
I don't think we fully have accepted the urban identity, though, which gets in the way. It gets in the way. I think
Yeah.
I like the rural identity, but I think we're struggling with Nantucket as an urban area in the summer. So,
We are. And we're also struggling because sometimes we don't want to keep, town and country. Town should stay urban and country should stay country. Sometimes we don't want to keep country because it's so valuable to have it turn into something else. And I think those are the struggles it was funny, at NPDC, we went through some of this stuff kind of came up, which was interesting because you usually don't have a chance to talk about some of these things, which is good.
Since we're talking about things we've done, I attended a conference or mini conference last Friday about the future of food. And a gentleman from, I think, Prince Edward Island, who's done a lot of, it was fascinating to, he was talking about that we have this huge ocean and that we should think about that as farming, not so much the fish farms, but it was, obviously he did an outstanding job. But there's some real opportunities for our island, to do some pretty innovative and low cost farming of whether it's kelp and mussels and scallops and oysters, and there were several fishermen there that were local people who were very knowledgeable about it. So it would be nice to foster that thinking for the community.
Motion to adjourn now?
Yes.
second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I didn't see that shift thing coming.
Yep.
No, but for all of you.